You know, there are mornings where you wake up, pour your coffee, and look out at the world thinking it's going to be a good day. And then there are mornings where you walk out your front door and find Patricia Vance standing at the edge of your driveway, vibrating with the sort of pent-up energy that usually precedes a natural disaster or a really expensive lawsuit. I was holding my mug, the steam curling up into the crisp morning air of suburbia, a place I moved to specifically for the quiet, for the illusion of order, when I saw her pointing a manicured finger at my pride and joy. Now, before we get into the madness that followed, you have to understand something about these roses. They weren't just bushes I picked up at Home Depot on a whim. These were Queen of Sweden roses, a delicate, upright variety that I had spent 3 years coaxing from spindly little sticks into a 7-foot-tall wall of cascading pink perfection. They were my therapy, my meditation, my proof that if you nurture something with enough patience, it will give you beauty in return. But Patricia, who serves as the self-appointed Supreme Chancellor of the Oakwood Hills Homeowners Association, didn't see beauty. She saw a violation of code, a glitch in her matrix of beige siding and perfectly edged lawns. "Leo," she said, and the way she said my name sounded like the snap of a dry twig. "Do you see the issue here?" I took a sip of my coffee, trying to summon the patience of a saint, which is difficult when you're dealing with a woman who once measured the length of my grass with a ruler she keeps in her purse. "Good morning, Patricia," I said, keeping my voice level. "I see a very healthy, very happy rose bush that is currently blooming its heart out. Is it photosynthesizing too loudly for you?" She didn't smile. Patricia hasn't smiled since the Clinton administration, and rumor has it her facial muscles have actually atrophied from decades of scowling at garbage cans left out past 6 p.m. "Don't be facetious," she snapped, adjusting her glasses which hung on a beaded chain around her neck. "I'm talking about the silhouette, Leo, the energy of the plant." I blinked, genuinely confused now. "The energy?" "It's aggressive," she declared, and she said the word aggressive with the same gravity one might use to describe a rabid wolf or a tax audit. I looked at the roses. They were swaying gently in the breeze. A bumblebee was literally rolling around in one of the blooms, drunk on pollen. It was the most peaceful scene imaginable. "Patricia," I said, stepping off the porch, "it's a plant. It doesn't have intent. It doesn't have an agenda. It just grows." "It looms," she countered, pulling out her weapon of choice, a metal tape measure that she wielded like a switchblade, extending it with a sharp zip-click sound that echoed in the cul-de-sac. "It's jagged. It's sharp. It projects hostility. Look at the angles, Leo. When I sit in my breakfast nook across the street, I feel threatened." "Threatened?" I repeated, fighting the urge to laugh because I knew laughing would only make the vein in her forehead pop. "You feel threatened by a flower?" "It's the vibe," she insisted, using a word I was 100% sure she didn't understand. "It disrupts the visual harmony of the street. It screams wilderness. It screams chaos. And quite frankly, it looks like something you'd find protecting a drug den, not a family home." That was the line, drug den. I looked at my Honda Civic, washed and waxed in the driveway. I looked at my freshly power-washed sidewalk. And then I looked at this woman who had just compared my horticultural masterpiece to a cartel compound. "I'm citing you," she said, retracting the tape measure with a violent snap. "Rule 14, Section B. Landscaping must not present a threatening or aggressive profile. You have distinct instructions, Leo. Fix the silhouette. Make it friendly. Make it soft. Make it something that makes me smile when I drink my herbal tea, or cut it down." She turned on her heel, her sensible walking shoes crunching on the asphalt, and marched back to her house, leaving me standing there with cold coffee and a burning seed of spite planting itself deep in my chest. 2 days later, the official letter arrived on the heavy, cream-colored cardstock that the HOA spends our dues on instead of fixing the potholes at the entrance. I ripped it open, and there it was in black and white. Notice of violation, botanical aggression. Remediation required. Modify vegetation to conform to soft, welcoming, non-threatening standards within 7 days or face a daily fine of $500 and forced removal. $500 a day. I sat at my kitchen island, staring at the paper, and I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the feeling of being bullied by a bureaucracy that values conformity over life. I walked to the window and looked out at the roses, glowing soft orange in the sunset. And then I looked across the street at Patricia's house, a soulless gray box with a lawn that looked like a billiards table, devoid of joy, devoid of character. Friendly. I muttered to myself, the word tasting like ash. She wants friendly, she wants soft. And that's when I saw it. In the driveway of the house next to mine, the Miller family had left some toys out, and slumped against their mailbox was a giant, golden-brown teddy bear, its button eyes staring blankly at the street, its stitched smile permanent and unmoving. It was the universal symbol of comfort, of childhood, of softness. A slow, cold grin spread across my face as the gears clicked into place. If Patricia wanted friendly, I was going to give her friendly. I was going to give her so much friendliness she would choke on it. I didn't go to a normal landscaper. You don't hire Bob's Lawn Care for a job born out of pure vengeance. You need an artist, a visionary, someone who looks at a shrub and sees a soul trapped in cellulose. I spent that Friday night trawling the weirdest corners of the horticultural internet until I found a website that was just a black screen with the sound of wind howling, and slowly, white Gothic text faded in. Wolfgang's sculptural greenery, liberating the leaf, tormenting the twig. I clicked on the portfolio, and it was madness. Hedges shaped like gargoyles, cypress trees trimmed to look like grasping hands, topiary that looked like it could walk away if you turned your back. I called the number at midnight, and a voice answered, deep and accented, sounding like it was coming from the bottom of a well. Speak, the voice said. Is this Wolfgang? I asked. That depends, he replied. Are you looking for a trim, or are you looking for a resurrection? I'm looking for revenge, I said, and I need it to be shaped like a teddy bear. There was a pause, a rustling of leaves on the other end, and then, I am listening. Wolfgang arrived the next morning at dawn, driving a matte black utility van that looked like it had been used for bank heists in a previous life. He stepped out, a giant of a man, standing at least 6'4", wearing black cargo pants with more pockets than seemed legally distinct, a tank top revealing arms covered in vine tattoos, and welding goggles resting on his forehead. He didn't shake my hand. He walked straight to the roses, standing inches from the thorns, breathing them in. Queen of Sweden, he whispered, his voice rumbling like a distant thunderstorm. Noble stock, strong canes, much suffering in these roots. Yeah, I said, walking up behind him. Patricia across the street says they're aggressive. She wants them soft. She wants them to make her smile. Wolfgang turned to me, lowering his goggles over his intense blue eyes. She fears the wild. She fears the truth of the thorn. Exactly, I said. So can we do it? Can we turn these 3 massive bushes into giant, smiling teddy bears? I want them to be the softest, cuddliest, most aggressively friendly things she has ever seen. Wolfgang looked at the bushes, then at Patricia's house where the blinds were twitching, and cracked his knuckles. We will not just make them bears, Leo, he said, a manic grin spreading across his face. We will make them gods of plush. We will use wire armatures. We will weave the canes. We will graft new blooms for the features. But it will be loud. The creation is violent. Let it be loud, I said. Let her hear every cut. Sunday morning in Oakwood Hills is sacred, a time for silence, for reading the paper, for judging your neighbor's car wash technique. That silence was shattered at 7 a.m. sharp by the roar of an industrial chainsaw. Wolfgang didn't work alone. He brought 2 assistants, Lars and Blade, who looked like his clones but smaller and wirier, and they unloaded massive steel frames from the back of the van. The sound tore through the cul-de-sac like a physical blow. Across the street, Patricia's front door flew open so hard I thought it would come off the hinges, and she stormed out in a pink bathrobe and curlers, looking like a rage-filled stick of cotton candy. What is happening? She shrieked, marching to the edge of her lawn, waving her arms. It is Sunday morning. You are violating the peace. I walked down my driveway, wearing heavy-duty ear defenders, and lifted one cup. Good morning, Patricia, I shouted over the idle rumble of the saws. Just getting an early start on that compliance work you ordered. Gotta meet that deadline. This isn't landscaping, she yelled, pointing at Wolfgang, who was currently wrestling a thorny branch into a steel cage. This is industrial warfare. I'm modifying the silhouette. I yelled back, channeling my inner bureaucrat. You said the angles were too sharp. We're softening them up. Trust the process. She stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish, unable to compete with the decibels. And finally, she clamped her hands over her ears and ran back inside. For the next 8 hours, my front yard became a theater of surgery. Wolfgang and his team didn't just cut, they wove. They placed 3 8-foot-tall steel armatures over the bushes, frames shaped like sitting teddy bears, and then they spent hours painstakingly threading the living rose canes through the mesh, tying them with soft twine, forcing the plant to conform to the shape of the bear. It was brutal, intricate work, and every time a thorn pricked them, they didn't flinch, they just kept weaving. By 2 p.m., the shapes were undeniable. The bottom bush was fluffed out to form the legs and belly, the middle section cinched for the torso, and the top sculpted into a large, round head with distinctive, stubby ears. I was standing on the sidewalk, admiring the sheer mass of them, when a police cruiser rolled up. It was Officer Miller, a 20-year veteran who knew Patricia's number by heart because she called 911 whenever a teenager skateboarded past her house. He got out of the car, adjusting his belt, looking tired. "Afternoon, Leo," he said, eyeing the massive green shapes. "We got a call. Anonymous, naturally. Report of ritualistic pagan structures being erected in your yard. Also a noise complaint." I laughed. "Pagan structures? Officer, it's topiary." Miller squinted at the wire frames. Is that a bear?" "It's a snuggle squad," I corrected him. 3 of them. Patricia wanted friendly. "Is there anything friendlier than a teddy bear?" Miller started to chuckle, shaking his head. "You're messing with her." "Malicious compliance, officer. Perfectly legal. No height limit on vegetation in the bylaws," I checked. "And since the frames are internal supports for the plant, they aren't statues." Miller looked at Patricia's house, saw the curtains moving, and sighed. "All right, I'm marking this as unfounded. But do me a favor? Make sure they have nice smiles. The friendliest smiles you've ever seen," I promised. And that was the final touch. As the sun began to set, Wolfgang opened a special cooler he had brought from the van. "The soul," he whispered. He pulled out bundles of science, cuttings from other rose varieties ready for grafting. "For the eyes," he said, holding up dark red, almost black Baccarat roses. "We graft these into the sockets. When they bloom, they will be deep voids of passion." "And the mouth?" I asked. He pulled out a bundle of iceberg roses, pure, stark white. "We graft the white in a crescent shape," he said, tracing a grin in the air. A wide, toothy grin. "It will take a few weeks to fully bloom, but the white buds will create the outline immediately." "Do it," I said. They worked under floodlights late into the night, splicing the new colors into the green faces of the bears, and then Wolfgang added the piece de resistance, a small, wooden paddle attached to the back of the head canes, hidden in the foliage. "Aerodynamics," he explained, his teeth glinting in the light. "The neck is loose. When the wind blows from the north, the head will counterweight. It will nod. It will agree with her." By midnight, they were done, and we covered the 3 giants with massive canvas tarps to hide the surprise until the deadline. Monday morning, 7:58 a.m. I stood in my driveway, dressed in my best responsible neighbor polo shirt, waiting. Patricia stepped out of her house exactly 2 minutes later, clipboard in hand, ready to issue the fine, ready to win. "Good morning, Leo," she called out, her voice dripping with victory. "I see you've covered up the eyesore. Does this mean you're removing them?" I walked to the first tarp. "Not removing, Patricia. Refining. You asked for soft. You asked for a silhouette that would make you smile." "Well," she tapped her foot. "Let's see it." I grabbed the corner of the tarp. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced to the empty street and the few neighbors peeking out their windows, "I give you the Snuggle Squad." I yanked the tarp, and it slid off with a heavy whoosh. The reveal was shocking even to me. Standing there on my lawn were 3 8-foot-tall monsters made of dense, thorny leaves, shaped perfectly into teddy bears. But they weren't cute. They were looming. They had fat bellies and arms raised in a permanent hug that looked more like a grapple. The black Baccarat buds for eyes were tight and dark, looking like beady little pupils staring directly across the street. And the mouth, the white iceberg rose buds formed a jagged, toothy white line that curved up in a maniacal, frozen grin. Because rose leaves are serrated, the fur looked like thousands of tiny knives. "Oh my God," I heard a neighbor whisper. "Wait," I yelled, pulling the second and third tarps. Whoosh, whoosh. Now there were 3 of them, a phalanx of green, thorny giants facing Patricia's breakfast nook. What? Patricia choked out, dropping her clipboard. What is that? It's a teddy bear. I beamed, spreading my arms. Universal symbol of comfort. Look at the curves, Patricia. No sharp angles. Just round, chubby, organic shapes. Isn't it friendly? It's horrible, she whispered. Horrible. I feigned shock. Who hates teddy bears? Are you saying you hate hugs, Patricia? Just then, a gust of wind blew down the street, catching the hidden paddles. The head of the middle bear, the leader, slowly tilted forward, then rocked back. It nodded. Creak. Swish. It moved. Patricia shrieked, stepping back. It's nodding. It's agreeing with you, I said. It loves your outfit. Now all 3 bears were bobbing in a chaotic, disjointed rhythm. Nod, wobble, nod. Like they were muttering to each other, plotting something. Make it stop, she screamed. This is harassment. This is psychological warfare. I can't control the wind, Patricia, I said calmly. It's nature. It's the feng shui of the breeze. She called the police again, of course, screaming that she was being menaced by botanical giants. But when Officer Miller returned with a rookie in tow, he took one look at the nodding bears and had to hide his face to stop from laughing. Ma'am, Miller said, wiping a tear from his eye, I can't write a ticket for a bush being ugly, and I can't arrest a man for gardening. It's a bear. It's smiling. Technically, it fits your request. The battle wasn't over, though. 2 days later, the summons arrived taped to my door, emergency board meeting. Subject, the unauthorized and offensive topiary structures. The entire neighborhood turned out for the meeting, setting up lawn chairs in the cul-de-sac like it was a block party. Patricia sat behind a card table, slamming a gavel that made the table shake. We are here to address the atrocity at 402 Oak Lane, she began, pointing a trembling finger at the bears behind me, which were currently glowing under the streetlights, their white teeth looking radioactive. These monsters are a mockery of our guidelines. I walked to the center of the court, holding a scroll case. Patricia, I said, my voice projecting to the back row. You cited me for an aggressive silhouette. I gave you the softest shape in existence. But you claim they are structures because of the wire frames, correct? Correct, she yelled. Structures over 6 feet require a permit. You have no permit. They must come down tonight. I'm glad you brought that up, I said, unrolling the document Wolfgang had given me on thick, hemp paper with a wax seal. This, I announced, is a certificate of authenticity. A what? She asked. According to County Code 88B regarding public art, I explained, any piece created by a recognized artist that serves as sculptural expression is protected from HOA aesthetic bylaws under the Freedom of Expression Clause. This certifies that the Snuggle Squad is an original, one-of-a-kind living sculpture by Wolfgang Vanderbar, valued at. I pointed to the bottom of the page. Bob, the HOA president who sat next to Patricia looking like he wanted to die, leaned over and read the number. $50,000, Bob gasped. 50 grand, I confirmed. If you force me to destroy this art, I will sue the HOA for the full value plus emotional damages for the loss of my cultural heritage. Bob dropped the paper like it was on fire. Martha, Bob said to Patricia, using her first name which she hated, we don't have 50 grand. We spent the reserve fund on the entrance sign. It's a trick, Patricia screamed. It's not art. It's a bush shaped like a bear. Art is subjective, I said. I move for a vote. Who likes the bears? A murmur went through the crowd. I like them, said Mrs. Johnson next door. My kids name them. The middle one is Mr. Prickles. They slow down traffic, another neighbor yelled out. People stop speeding to look at them. I think they're hilarious, said the guy from the corner. And honestly, Patricia, you complained about my mailbox color last year, so I'm voting for the bears just to spite you. Patricia looked at the mob. She looked at the $50,000 appraisal, and she looked at the bears, which were slowly nodding in the evening breeze. I'm overruling the citation, Bob declared, banging the gavel. The bears stay. Meeting adjourned. The crowd erupted. Patricia stood alone at the card table, looking small, defeated by the very rules she tried to weaponize. She packed up her clipboard in silence and shuffled back to her house, and the blinds at 403 were drawn tight, never to open fully again. That was 6 months ago. The Snuggle Squad is famous now, We get tourists. We get Instagrammers. Someone even left a jar of honey on the sidewalk as an offering. Wolfgang's business exploded, and he sends me a bottle of cactus wine every Christmas. And as for Patricia, well, we have a truce. I caught her outside a few weeks ago, looking tired, staring up at the bears whose red eyes were in full bloom, looking particularly demonic. "Mark," she said, quiet and resigned. "Patricia," I nodded. "The white ones," she pointed to the teeth. The grin. "It reflects moonlight into my bedroom. It's unsettling." I looked at the bears, realizing they were indeed terrifying at night. "I can trim the teeth," I offered. "Make the smile a little less manic. Maybe close the mouth a bit." She looked at me, surprised. "You would do that?" "Sure," I said. "The point was to make them friendly. Keeping you up at night isn't very friendly." For the first time in 5 years, the corners of her mouth twitched upward. "That would be appreciated," she said. "And Mark? The one on the left has aphids." "I know," I said. "I'm treating it with neem oil tomorrow." "Good," she said, turning back to her house. "Pests lower property values." I sat on my porch that evening, drinking a beer, watching the wind catch the head of the leader bear. They were ridiculous. They were thorny. They were monsters. And they were perfect. They were a monument to the most American of all freedoms, the freedom to be incredibly petty in the face of petty authority. I raised my bottle to the bears. "Here's to being friendly," I whispered, and the bear, slowly, gracefully, nodded back. So, I have to ask you guys, did I go too far with the $50,000 appraisal bluff? Or was that the chef's kiss on this whole revenge plot? And more importantly, have you ever used an HOA's own rules against them to create something undeniably hideous but legally protected? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories of malicious compliance. Until next time, keep your hedges high and your lawyers on speed dial. See ya.